It's 2015. You just got home from school or work and you turn on Daredevil. It's gritty, grounded, has riveting action, and at its core, it features an engrossing central character. It's surprisingly been 10 years since the first season, and really nothing has come close to scratching the itch that Daredevil has left with its cancellation. And since Daredevil Born Again is coming out soon, I thought this would be a perfect time to do a retrospective review of Daredevil. There are a lot of magnificent aspects that makes Daredevil so unique, but I want to start this video by analyzing Daredevil's writing philosophy. When you break it down, 90% of Daredevil is just characters sitting in rooms talking to each other. Yet, some of the most compelling moments arise from those long dialogue scenes, thus giving the narrative room to breathe and allowing emotions to thoroughly build. In an era where many films and TV shows rush through plot points to maintain audience retention, Daredevil opted to slow down, making every conversation feel rich with meaning and tension. Stephen DeKnight, who was the original showrunner, even had to convince Netflix to keep some of these long dialogue scenes in the show. An example being Matt asking Father Lantom if he believes in the devil. In this scene, Father Lantom delivers a gripping 4-minute monologue about a warlord butchering an innocent family, and he communicates that the devil may not physically exist, but the devil presides in men, which this all relates to Wilson Fisk. Having this longer duration gives the writer the ability to slowly engross the audience with the scene's depth. And the more engrossed you are, the stronger and more cathartic the payoff of the scene is. Given Season 1's success, this gave the creators more leverage to amplify this aspect in Seasons 2 and 3. In particular for Season 2, for Episode 3, we basically have a 15-minute long dialogue scene with Daredevil and the Punisher, where we explore the moral debate of killing versus imprisoning, is sparing people actually cowardly, and do criminals deserve redemption? Then this is all punctuated with a great conundrum in which the only way to save this criminal is for Matt to kill Frank, thus testing and pushing Matt to a potential breaking point. This is what I would identify as one of the best aspects within Daredevil. That slow and refined approach to dialogue scenes imbues the show with this premium texture that doesn't exist within a lot of media, or at least wasn't as abundant in 2015. It allows us to explore exciting and complicated themes, along with those themes being deeply entangled in guttural emotional moments. Then, even past Season 2, Eric Olson, who is the showrunner for Season 3, takes this writing philosophy and makes it his absolute priority. He specifically identifies this format of writing that he used a lot called sequel scenes. Essentially, you're building on one dialogue scene and doubling it with more development. The structure of most scenes are: a character comes in with an objective, they hit an obstacle, and then they either get or don't get what they want. A sequel scene goes on from that point. The character then has an emotional reaction, then they face a major dilemma where they have to make a choice, and the scene ends when they make the decision. There's a treasure trove of examples within Season 3, and the best one being the mental chess match between Karen and Fisk. This scene embodies that entire circle, but for two characters simultaneously. Karen comes in with the objective of agitating Fisk with the hope that he harms her and he goes back to prison. She does this by her saying she's going to publish a news story about him killing his father. The obstacle she faces is that this doesn't bother him, so she doesn't get what she wants. She then has a negative emotional reaction and turns to desperation. Now, she's faced with a major dilemma in which she can reveal her ace in that she killed James Wesley, someone Fisk was close to in Season 1, but in doing so, that will put her on his kill list. In other words, a major consequence for her action that will have rippling impacts in the narrative moving forward. Her final decision within the scene is revealing that. That development and progression is outstanding, but the twist of this scene that makes it even better is that the writers give Fisk the same agency. His objective and why he agrees to meet with Karen is that he wants to ask her if Matt is Daredevil, and her reaction to that question will tell him the answer. He doesn't have as much development as Karen, but the way the scene flows between these two characters being in control is riveting. It's also done with one subtle camera move where, when the character is feeling beat, the camera is wiped by the person in the foreground, and when they come back into the frame, they regain their composure and try a different strategy. It gives the scene this ebb and flow where it's this terrifying tug-of-war match and each character comes up with a unique counter to reverse the power dynamic. That alone is brilliant, but then it's even elevated by truly incredible acting and how the music builds the tension of this scene.
I killed Wesley. I shot him 7 times because the clip ran out. He deserved more.
This 10-minute dialogue confrontation I think is the thesis as to why Daredevil is spectacular, and I felt that Daredevil's other amazing aspects kind of overshadowed how great the underlying writing is. Because every episode is packed with these great scenes, and they're elevated especially by how great the characters are. I think the characters themselves and the dynamics between them deserved its own section of the video. Most of the riveting drama directly originates from the characters at a fundamental level. Like, Matt Murdock is interestingly a walking contradiction. He's a lawyer by day who follows the law, but at night, he's Daredevil and actively breaks the law. He's also so captivating because he's constantly grappling with this overarching conundrum of, does putting people behind bars do good, or should I turn to murder? This notion was debated and brought up extensively between Frank and Matt in Season 2, but it's especially tested in Season 3, in which what Frank says actually comes true. Fisk bypasses the justice system by manipulating the FBI, and now Matt is faced with the crushing decision of whether or not he should kill Fisk. The entire season puts this pressure on Matt, and each passing episode essentially adds more weight to this decision. This is especially amplified by the nature of the writing where our characters explore different solutions to put Fisk behind bars, but with each plan failing, it further tests the internal state of Matt upholding his code. Then this expertly pays off in the end, where Matt is on the cusp of breaking and killing Wilson Fisk, but he again accepts the path of law and justice. Challenging the internal state of your character and having them constantly question their inner faith and what drives them personally is what makes captivating characters. And to do that, you also need compelling side characters to act as that opposition for the main character. For Daredevil, that formula is rock solid where we have a great trio who essentially act as this triangle. Karen represents justice in the form of press and journalism, Foggy represents justice through law and order, and Matt pursues justice through vigilantism. So any scene that takes place within this triangle naturally has a lot of base conflict. Characters clash about how they want to accomplish a goal, and also argue about the general morality of their approach. Season 3 embodies this really well, and not only until the end of the season do they finally team up to take down Fisk. It acts as this overwhelmingly satisfying moment because it's synergized with the plot coming to a climax, and the character arcs also getting close to their climaxes. Another great aspect about each character having their own approach to a goal is that each of the main 3 protagonists have a lot of agency. Karen utilizes investigative journalism to find offshore bank accounts linked to Fisk and unearths his corruption. Foggy runs for district attorney and tries to gain the city's support in fighting Fisk. And Matt obviously goes in like a hammer and tries to deal with everything physically. Season 3 constantly sees each character trying to come up with different solutions that highlight their inner skills. It makes each character feel fully realized, and as they fail, this especially makes their team up even more cathartic. Although, this is only a dynamic within Season 3. Seasons 1 and 2 utilize the classic dynamic of trying to hide your identity from friends. This is a staple within the superhero genre, but it works excellently in Daredevil as it synergizes with the show's dramatic atmosphere. It adds to the already immense tension in the narrative, as Matt is living a double life. It pushes him to a constant state of being close to boiling over and falling apart. He's juggling so much responsibility, he's protecting his friends from danger of being associated with Daredevil, and this compounds exponentially for the internal state of Matt's character. So seeing him work through this conflict is consistently riveting. Then of course, seeing the payoff of Matt finally telling his friends about his identity has a massive impact in the story, and it's extremely complex. Does the character feel betrayed? Are they surprised? Are they angry or happy? It's just an influx of emotions that result in an engrossing hurricane. And for season 3, not only do we play out that reveal, it's also surprisingly twisted on us in the fact that we learn about the secret identity of someone other than Daredevil, which is Matt's mother is actually Sister Maggie. I found this twist to be kind of ironic in the fact that she was essentially a surrogate mother type, but then she literally turns out to be his mother. So yeah, I think character identity twists are some of the best in writing from the pure fact that it entirely reverses the dynamic for said characters, thus spicing it up and creating something new and interesting. Then before moving on, we have to address Wilson Fisk. Wilson is the personification of a perfect villain, and one of the main aspects of what makes a villain so great is how they pair with the main character. They have to both challenge each other externally and internally. That's something that a lot of shows or movies get wrong in that they might tick one of those boxes. But Wilson Fisk and Matt Murdock don't just fight each other physically, but they clash with their separate ideologies. Also, ironically, they have the same goal, and that's what makes Wilson so compelling. He's just going about it in a more corrupt and villainous way, to the point that Matt needs to stop him. Wilson is the protagonist from his perspective, and another aspect that especially grounds him is Vanessa. He isn't a cold and emotionless character, and instead, that's a core aspect of Wilson Fisk, and if anything, that's one of his weaknesses. The way he expresses his emotions is guttural and visceral, and this may be a downside, but that's all made up with his sheer intelligence. Writing intelligent villains is very difficult because coming up with mastermind plots requires you to actually be smart, and then simultaneously, coming up with a tangible way for our heroes to beat them is just as difficult. And that's something that Daredevil Season 3 does so effectively. Watching Wilson's year-long plan unfold in which he's been manipulating the FBI from the get-go is captivating, and has this strong progression for his character, earning back his freedom, along with his clever and twisted manipulation of Poindexter, which that villain as well is basically made even better from the comics, which is an insane feat to do. But yeah, not only does Daredevil have an incredible roster of protagonists, the villains are also just as good, and that pairing creates a truly iconic story. Moving away from the writing and characters, let's finally address how Daredevil redefines action. Daredevil is unique from an action perspective because instead of putting a strong emphasis on spectacle, they instead put it on the character and their struggle. They focus on the impacts and the damage Matt receives. It's not about how flashy the action is, but how our characters respond and overcome the damage they sustain, and the more they sell that damage as being raw and effective, it makes the action have significantly more weight. In this regard, Daredevil changed the game for the superhero genre in which the main character actually felt vulnerable. Vulnerability is the true essence as to what hooks the audience in caring about someone surviving an encounter. Characters being impervious to damage is one of my most hated action tropes where main characters don plot armor and they chance through encounters from enemies clearly not trying to kill them, or they just get lucky. The more you compromise a character's vulnerability, you invalidate the danger they're in, and without danger in action scenes, all you have is spectacle. It's weightless and becomes nothing more than guilty pleasure eye candy. As a recent example, we can look at Captain America 4. All of the action in that movie is really just spectacle. It doesn't sell Sam's personal struggle, and we're never at a point where we fear for his well-being. He practically receives no injuries throughout the entire film. This is in direct contrast to Daredevil, and these two projects are on opposite ends of the spectrum. Matt actually has to recover from fights because the injuries he sustains are life-threatening. The beginning of Season 3 is basically just Matt healing from the wounds he sustained in The Defenders, and that as well is an opportunity for character growth. Like in Season 1, you compare the aspect of recovering from fights with character development, where Matt and Claire learn more about each other. After that, you then have the added obstacle of fighting through physical impairments, thus making the action even more insurmountable. Daredevil is an endless cycle of this vulnerability, and that's what makes the show so gritty and grounded. It's one of the only superhero shows that opts to be realistic, and that's one of the major components that makes Daredevil so unique and thus magnificent. Also, even though the budget isn't insanely high and the action is smaller scale, that doesn't mean there aren't moments of great spectacle. The showrunners still selectively use that budget to instill certain action scenes with high production value. Those scenes of note are primarily the one-shot fight scenes. Not only does Daredevil bring back tangible tension to action, but they also popularize using wonders in television. However, a lot of shows or movies use it as a gimmick that feels nothing more than a band-aid to save mediocre scenes. But for Daredevil, it synergizes with the show's grounded nature. Since we are going through a long uninterrupted single shot, we feel Daredevil's exhaustion and pain. It's utterly amplified. It gives us a continuous journey in which the audience can more clearly bond with the main character, increasing our want for him to get out of the situation alive. All of the wonders are great, but the one that really stands out is the prison fight. Not only is it the longest, Charlie Cox also doesn't have anything hiding his face, so we actually know it's him throughout the scene. This sells the character's anguish even more as we can see his facial expressions. He's exhausted, constantly stammering around, coughing up blood, and whenever we get a close-up of his face, he's desperately gasping for air. Then, despite this also having great choreography, they're also delivering entire pages of dialogue. Just thinking about how they achieved this one-shot action scene on a TV show budget makes my head spin, given how big the set is and how much planning was required to execute this. I'm also primarily using the wonders as an example for good spectacle action, but there are still plenty of other smaller scale action scenes that still look great. Going into one quick final strength of Daredevil is that it treats its setting as a character. New York City is integral to the show's identity. It's what Daredevil and Wilson Fisk fight for. The New York City Police Department, its press, church, and even citizens play critical roles in the story. And the city itself is the embodiment of opportunity that Daredevil fights to protect, and on the other side of the coin, corruption and Fisk spreading crime. There's a certain amount of patriotism and pride that drives our characters in wanting to protect the city. They have a fundamental motivation and love for this setting that further boosts their drive in defeating Fisk. It gives off this empowering aura. Every action that Wilson takes also has a greater impact because he's directly killing or destroying major parts of the city. Like in Season 3, when he sends Poindexter to massacre the New York Bulletin as a fake Daredevil, it's extremely gutting and tragic because it's not only putting our characters in danger, but it's an attack on the identity of New York City. And the same thing goes for the church massacre. This is a pretty brilliant way to give your story more of a narrative impact, as you give your setting a major emphasis in the story. Multiple other aspects that are elevated in having New York City as the setting are that it drastically increases the premium feel of the show, the setting directly influences set pieces, and the tone further feels more atmospheric. Rain-soaked streets, Daredevil sitting on a rooftop peering down at a city, or Wilson Fisk towering over Hell's Kitchen in a penthouse. It's hard to think about Daredevil without New York City being associated with it, and that's something the showrunners put a lot of thought into. Daredevil overall is an outstanding show. It has 2 masterfully orchestrated seasons, and even its weakest season is better than most of what the MCU has turned out in the last 5 years. The show has juicy and amazing writing, all the characters are iconic, its usage of action imbues the story with tangible weight and grit, and even the setting acts as a character within the show. I'm nervous that Born Again won't be able to capture the greatness of Netflix's Daredevil, but here's to hoping. Thank you for watching, and let me know in the comments what you love about Daredevil. My Letterboxd, Discord, and Patreon links are in the description, and have a great day. Thank you immensely to my top patrons Logan Farmer and Simply Put.